The boardroom fell silent. Kyle stood at the front presenting my work like it was his own. After months of development, he said, clicking to the next slide, I've created a comprehensive strategy that will revolutionize our client acquisition. Every word was mine. Every slide I'd designed. Kyle had asked me to keep it quiet. Let's surprise the board together, he'd said. I thought we meant as a team. The board nodded, impressed. Kyle's chest puffed out. He glanced at me once, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Victory. Then he slid a document across the table. Pre-approved. Already signed off. That's when I realized. This wasn't just a presentation. This was an erasure. Kyle had planned every second of it. I drove home in silence. The office had eruated in congratulations for Kyle. People walked past my desk like I was invisible. I stared at my reflection. My jaw was clenched. My eyes burned with something darker than sadness. Something I'd never felt before toward my brother. Kyle and I had always been close. I'd helped him get a job here 3 years ago. Recommended him personally. Believed in him. And this is how he repaid that belief. I realized the truth in that moment. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't Kyle getting caught up. This was calculated. Deliberate. The pre-approved document. The careful presentation. The flash of satisfaction in his eyes. I wasn't going to let this go. I couldn't sleep that night. I opened my email archive and scrolled back through conversations with Kyle. My stomach twisted. 3 months ago, when I'd shared the strategy framework with him, he'd asked detailed questions. Too detailed. Mapping out exactly what I'd built. 6 weeks ago, he'd sat in a meeting where I'd presented early results. Quiet in the corner. Taking notes. Every major success I'd had in the past 2 years, Kyle had been in the room. And every single one. He'd mentioned casually to senior leadership later, inserting himself into the narrative. I found the emails where supervisors thanked me. Then found Kyle's responses, where he'd subtly included himself. Then I noticed something that made me go cold. Missing file. A critical one that showed who initiated my project. Should have been there. It wasn't. I didn't go to work the next day. Instead, I dove deeper into the company's digital history. Took 7 hours, but I found it. Not the original file, that was gone, but metadata proving it had existed. Someone with Kyle's access level had deleted it the night before the board meeting. Then I went into the financial records. Kyle's position didn't normally give him budget access. But 3 months ago, someone had granted him temporary privileges. Those privileges had never been revoked. What I found made me stand up from my chair. Over 18 months, Kyle had redirected small amounts from various project budgets into a separate account. Nothing massive. Nothing triggering alerts. But spread across multiple projects, it totaled nearly $40,000. Money that should have funded those projects. Money I'd signed off on in good faith. I saved everything to an encrypted USB drive and called a lawyer. The lawyer, Victoria Thompson, listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back and said 4 words that changed everything. You're not his only victim. She explained that the financial redirections were technically embezzlement. Not huge. Not jail time necessarily, but enough to end his career. More importantly, she said, people like Kyle never stop at one betrayal. How many others has he done this to? She asked. Over the next week, I had coffee with 3 former colleagues. People who'd left in the past year. I didn't tell them why I was asking, just mentioned curiosity about their experiences. The first one hesitated before speaking. I think Kyle took credit for some of my work on a client pitch. It bothered me, but I couldn't prove it. I just left. The second said something similar. Her entire digital marketing strategy had been presented as Kyle's innovation. The third dropped a bomb. Kyle stole my data analysis code. When I asked him, he said we were collaborating. I felt so crazy I apologized to him. I sat listening to them describe years of manipulation. Kyle hadn't just betrayed me. He'd built a system so refined that his victims questioned their own sanity. I returned to work the following Monday, acting like nothing had changed. I smiled at Kyle. I answered his casual questions. I was an actress playing his trusting sister, every line perfectly delivered. I started sitting in on meetings I wasn't required to attend, just listening, observing, taking notes that looked like work but were actually field reports on Kyle's behavior. I noticed he checked his email obsessively, that he always positioned himself between the door and his desk, afraid someone might see his screen. He hesitated before saying things, checking the room first. Then one afternoon I caught something that made my breath stop. Kyle was composing an email, his back to me. I glanced at the screen, just a fraction of a second, but saw enough. He was emailing the board chairman about performance reviews, listing major projects under his name, not mine. He noticed my gaze and quickly minimized the window. That's when I understood. He wasn't just taking credit for past work. He was actively rewriting history before anyone could verify the real story. I spent 2 weeks creating something I'd never done before. A meticulous timeline of every lie, every theft, every manipulation. Dates, amounts, project names, evidence. Cross-referenced against company documents and email chains. It was beautiful. It was a weapon. My lawyer reviewed it and nodded. This is thorough. This is prosecutable. But I didn't want legal prosecution. That would bury the truth with confidentiality agreements. I wanted everyone to know. I researched and found a legal loophole in our company's charter. The board had power to audit any employee's work history if 3 senior members requested it. Nothing required notifying the employee first. 3 senior board members. I knew I could reach them. I submitted a small, harmless correction in a company document. A typo in a budget summary. I made sure Kyle would notice it. He did. Within an hour, he emailed asking why I'd changed it. I replied calmly. Just noticed it was wrong. Wanted to fix it before the board sees it. He didn't respond. But I noticed him rechecking that document for 3 days straight. He was paranoid. He knew someone was watching. I repeated the process twice more that week. Small corrections. Minor additions. Nothing constituting actual work. Just enough to let him know I was in the system. That nothing escaped my notice. His emails became shorter. His demeanor shifted. He stopped making eye contact in meetings. When he did glance at me, he'd immediately look away. Perfect. In the next department meeting, I began unraveling his credibility. Not directly. Never directly. But by asking questions. A budget projection had a mathematical inconsistency. I raised my hand gently. Kyle, I'm trying to understand the numbers in section 3. Can you walk us through the calculation? He explained. He nodded. Then asked another question. And another. Each designed to force him to elaborate, to justify, to fill silences that made him uncomfortable. By the end, a board member frowned. These numbers don't quite add up. Kyle flushed red. I'll review them. I did the same thing in the next meeting. And the next. I never accused him of anything. I never raised my voice. I simply asked innocent questions that exposed gaps in his logic, problems in his presentations, places where his narrative didn't hold together. Colleagues started whispering. Did anyone else notice Kyle seemed off? His presentations weren't as polished. His numbers didn't check out. He was frustrated. But he couldn't accuse me of sabotage without looking paranoid. I arranged a coffee meeting with Thomas, a board member. I didn't go in hot. I didn't dump evidence on him. I've noticed some inconsistencies in project approvals, I said carefully. Have you noticed anything unusual in the documentation we've been receiving? He paused. Then, actually yes. Some timelines don't match up. Some approvals seem out of order. He nodded. I didn't want to make accusations without being sure. By the end, Thomas mentioned he'd been meaning to do a deeper audit anyway. Just routine, he said. But I could see the question in his eyes. The suspicion. I did the same with 2 other board members. Different approaches. Same underlying message. Something doesn't add up, and it involves Kyle. One board member, Diane, looked uncomfortable. "You're not saying he's done something wrong," she said carefully. "I'm just saying I've noticed inconsistencies," I replied. "And I think someone should look into them." By the time I left, Diane was taking notes. I went back to those budget redirections and mapped them carefully. Kyle had approved transfers right after projects matching those amounts were completed. It looked like he was siphoning success fees that should have been reinvested. I prepared a spreadsheet. Nothing illegal about me analyzing company finances. But I made sure my analysis was impossible to ignore. Timestamps, amounts, project names, source documents for every transfer. I added a note. These reallocations appear approved without standard review procedures. Recommend verification with finance department. Just a suggestion. Just something I'd noticed. I emailed it to Marcus, our department head, with a brief message. Wanted to flag this for your review. Let me know if I'm reading these spreadsheets wrong. Marcus didn't respond for 3 days. Then he called me into his office. "Where did you get this data?" he asked, staring at my spreadsheet. "From the standard budget portal. I was doing quarterly analysis and noticed the pattern." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Thank you for bringing this to me. Don't mention this to anyone else for now." I could see it in his face. He was going to investigate. While pieces moved behind the scenes, I worked on something equally important. I worked on myself. I kept a detailed journal of every betrayal, every manipulation, every lie Kyle had told. Writing it down helped me understand this wasn't personal. This was systematic. This was who he was. Understanding meant I could stop being angry. I became something much more dangerous. Completely calm. The calmer I became, the more his arrogance showed. He started talking louder in meetings, making grander claims. He became almost manic in his need to prove himself. I watched with the detachment of someone watching a film. He was writing his own ending, completely unaware. People started noticing his behavior. At lunch, a coworker said quietly, "Kyle's been acting weird. Do you know what's going on?" Shrugged. "No idea. But he does seem stressed." That comment would spread. By week's end, half the office would whisper about Kyle's strange behavior. And none of it would be my fault. The board scheduled a major presentation for Thursday. Kyle would present quarterly results and recommendations. All senior leadership would attend. All the people I'd planted seeds with. I spent Wednesday night preparing a document. A single, devastating document that was absolutely legal, factual, and bulletproof. I titled it, Timeline of Project Attribution and Budget Allocation. Then I listed every project Kyle had taken credit for, with evidence. Not accusations, just facts. Dates, amounts, my contemporaneous notes from when I'd done the work. For the financial discrepancies, I included Marcus's own internal memo flagged the irregular transfers, paired with Kyle's approvals. For stolen code and strategies, I included statements from Aaron, Nicole, and Travis. They'd agreed to provide statements after I explained what I'd found. The document was beautiful in its simplicity. No emotion. No accusations. Just evidence arranged in an unavoidable narrative. I saved it in 3 places. Personal files. Work email. And I emailed it to my lawyer, marked privileged, so if Kyle found it, it couldn't be used against me legally. Then I set an alarm for 3:47 p.m. Thursday. As Kyle prepared for Thursday, I noticed something crucial. He was over-explaining everything. In every meeting he'd state something, then add unnecessary details, then add more explanation, then more justification. He was deeply insecure. And the more success he claimed, the more his insecurity leaked out. It was the doorway I needed. I watched him practice in the conference room that morning. He was memorizing word for word, reciting statistics over and over. The Kyle I'd grown up with, who could improvise and think on his feet, was gone. He'd been replaced by someone terrified of being exposed. Because some part of him knew. Some part understood that he was built on lies, and lies always crumble. I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered that flash of victory when he watched me realize what he'd done, and any sympathy evaporated. The boardroom was full. 20 people. The most important people in the company. Kyle stood at the front, sharp suit, looking confident. For 15 minutes he was flawless. He'd practiced well. Then he got to the numbers. The quarterly results. He quoted a specific revenue figure, attributing it to what he called my client acquisition strategy. The strategy wasn't just his. It was mine. Oh, mine. And the number was wrong. By $300,000. I watched Diane's eyes narrow. I watched Thomas exchange a glance with another board member. I watched Marcus's jaw tighten. Kyle didn't notice. He kept presenting, completely unaware his credibility was cracking in real time. The presentation ended to polite applause. Nothing enthusiastic, just obligation. As people filed out, the board members gathered in a corner, speaking quietly. Marcus joined them. They were looking at Kyle, their expressions heavy with suspicion. My alarm was set for 3:47 p.m. It was currently 3:51 p.m. I waited until Kyle returned to his office, probably feeling good about his presentation. Then I sent an email to those 4 board members. The subject: verification of quarterly numbers and project attribution. The body: I noticed a discrepancy in today's presentation. I've attached supporting documentation that may be helpful for your review. And I attached the document. Timeline. Evidence. The truth. Within an hour my phone rang. It was Thomas. Elliot, where did you get this information? He asked carefully. From company records, I said calmly. Everything in that document is documented and verifiable. He was quiet. Then, have you shared this with anyone else? Only my personal lawyer. For advice. I wasn't sure how to handle it. He thanked me and hung up. I could hear the weight in his voice. He understood what Kyle had done. There was something almost relieved in his tone, like a suspicion he'd been harboring had finally been confirmed. Within the next 2 hours, email threads began. I could see them forwarding messages about the presentation, about the numbers, about my document. They were fact-checking, calling finance, looking at project approvals. The machinery was moving faster than I'd anticipated. This was no longer my investigation. This had become the board's investigation. And they had resources I didn't. By 6 p.m. Diane called. I want to apologize, she said immediately, for not seeing this sooner. We've been reviewing the projects you mentioned. It's clear Kyle has been misattributing work. More than that, actually. We're seeing a pattern that goes back years. I said nothing, just let her talk. The board is going to have questions for him, she continued. Serious questions. We take this very seriously. And Elliot, you did the right thing bringing this forward. That took courage. I thanked her and hung up. Her last words echoed in my mind. Courage. Maybe that's what this was. Not revenge. Courage. That night messages arrived. Aaron texted. He's done it to others, hasn't he? Nicole emailed asking if she needed to provide a written statement. Travis sent, thank you. Monday morning, Kyle was called into a private meeting with 3 board members and Marcus. I didn't witness it, but I heard about it from everyone else. Kyle emerged pale and shaken. He went straight to his office and closed the door. He didn't come out for the rest of the day. That afternoon, Marcus requested a meeting. Just the 2 of us. I went into his office at 2 p.m. He looked exhausted. I need to ask you some direct questions, he said. And I need you to be completely honest. He nodded. Did Kyle take credit for work that wasn't his? He asked. Yes, I said simply. The client acquisition strategy presented to the board. Was that your work? Yes. And the budget discrepancies. Did you flag those because you noticed something wrong, or because you were investigating Kyle? This was the moment. I could protect myself or tell the truth. Both, I said. I noticed the inconsistencies initially. But once I looked deeper, I realized there was a deliberate pattern of misattribution and financial manipulation. I gathered evidence and consulted a lawyer. Then I brought it to the board. Marcus nodded slowly. You did the right thing. Even though it was your brother. Especially because it was my brother, I corrected quietly. That's the point. Over the next week, I maintained perfect calm while Kyle spiraled. He stopped making eye contact. He sat alone at lunch. In meetings, his hands would shake. He'd started checking over his shoulder constantly, expecting confrontation. He never confronted me directly. He was too afraid. I think he knew on some level that I was orchestrating everything, that I held all the pieces. One afternoon we were face to face in the break room. For a moment we just looked at each other. The brother I'd protected growing up. The brother I'd believed in. The brother who'd betrayed me. I didn't mean for it to get like this, he said quietly. His voice was different now. Muller. Defeated. I poured my coffee without responding. Elliot, come on. Or family. Can't we fix this? The desperation in his voice should have moved me. Maybe it did just a little. But I thought about every late night I'd spent questioning my own sanity because of him. Every moment I'd doubted my own contributions because he'd made me feel like maybe I was overreacting. I turned to look at my brother. For the first time since the board meeting, I truly looked at him. And I realized something important. He still didn't understand what he'd done. Not really. He thought this was about credit, about money, about acknowledgement. He didn't understand he'd violated my trust, made me question my own reality, stolen not just my work but my sense of safety with him. There's nothing to fix, I said calmly. You did this. Now you deal with it. He flinched like I'd struck him. As the board's review continued, something unexpected happened. People started reaching out. Messages came through. Conversations in the hallway. People thanking me for exposing Kyle. People saying they'd suspected something but didn't have proof. A junior analyst named Priya pulled me aside. Thank you, she said quietly. He took my entire market analysis. I've been blaming myself for not speaking up. I assured her it wasn't her fault. More importantly, these people started supporting me subtly. In meetings, when I'd present ideas, they'd build on them enthusiastically. When someone mentioned Kyle's work, they'd casually note similar work had been done previously. They became a quiet chorus of validation. Kyle started losing his grip. I could see it in how people responded to him. Where there had been deference, there was now skepticism. Where there had been inclusion, there was now distance. He was becoming an outsider. 2 weeks into the review, Kyle cornered me in the parking garage after work. His face was red. His fists were clenched. Why did you do this? He demanded. Why couldn't you just let it go? I was completely calm. Because you stole from me, I said. And you made me feel like I was crazy for noticing. I was going to give you credit, he said desperately. I just needed to establish myself first. The board had to see I could lead. But you didn't establish yourself, I said quietly. You established yourself on my work. On Aaron's work. On everyone you've manipulated. So what now? He asked, his voice cracking. You've destroyed me. No, I said. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. He shook his head, tears forming. We're brothers. We're supposed to protect each other. I felt something shift in my chest. A moment of empathy. He was right. We were supposed to protect each other. He'd broken that sacred trust. But I didn't regret what I'd done. You made your choice, I said simply. Now live with it. The formal review concluded with Kyle meeting the full board. I wasn't in the room, but Marcus filled me in afterward. Kyle had admitted to some things, denied others, tried to frame everything as normal collaboration that had been misunderstood. The board didn't believe him. They'd reviewed the email chains, spoken with the people I'd connected them with, audited the financial records. The evidence was irrefutable. They're considering their options, Marcus told me carefully. There's a legal aspect because of the financial component. There's an HR aspect because of the misattribution. They're deciding the right course of action. What he meant was, Kyle might face legal consequences. He would definitely face career consequences. I felt the weight of that knowledge settle. I'd set events in motion. Now they were beyond my control. The machinery of corporate justice was turning. But the board's investigation went deeper. They reviewed projects from years ago. In 7 years at the company, I'd handled dozens of major accounts. In the 5 years Kyle was there, more than half the credit for my work had slowly migrated toward him in company narrative. Then they found something worse. 3 years ago, Kyle had been involved in a project that failed. Client account we'd lost. The failure had resulted in restructuring and some layoffs. But when they dug into original documentation, they discovered Kyle had made a critical error that contributed significantly to the failure. An error that should have been flagged but never was. More importantly, they found evidence I had tried to flag it. An email I'd sent directly to Kyle, warning about the problem. He'd received it but ignored it. Kyle had let my warning go unheeded. When the project failed, he'd quietly encouraged people to believe it was shared responsibility. People had been laid off because of that failure. Kyle had let me carry some of the burden. When the board confronted him, he admitted it quietly, like he'd been waiting to be found out. That's when they knew he'd been lying about everything. The board called a company-wide meeting for Friday afternoon. I sat in the back of the large conference room. Why was everyone being called together? The board chairman, Margaret, stood at the podium. She was grave, professional, careful. We have completed an internal review of several recent projects and financial matters, she said. This review has revealed serious concerns regarding the attribution of work, the misuse of budget authority, and the misrepresentation of accomplishments to this company and its board. The room went silent. Effective immediately, we are implementing new approval processes for all project attribution and budget allocation. Additionally, we are reassigning Kyle Thompson to a new position pending the outcome of a formal investigation into his conduct over the past 3 years. I watched Kyle in the front row. His face completely drained. We would like to acknowledge the employees who brought these concerns to our attention, Margaret continued. Specifically, we want to recognize Elliot Thompson for his integrity in reporting irregularities, and for his cooperation in the review process. She looked directly at me. The entire room turned. I stood slowly, nodding in acknowledgement. I watched the shift happen in real time. How people looked at Kyle now compared to an hour ago. The whispers spreading. The understanding dawning. Kyle had been the star. Now he was exposed as a fraud. The aftermath unfolded over the next few weeks. Kyle lost the opportunity to lead the expansion project. That went to me. He lost his promised bonus. He lost the respect of everyone in the office. Colleagues who'd once sought his approval now avoided him actively. The board offered him a choice. Resign quietly with severance, or face termination proceedings that would destroy his professional reputation permanently. He resigned. I watched him pack his desk on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the break room, visible enough that he'd see me as he left. He paused when our eyes met. I saw regret, shame, anger. Mostly, I saw the understanding that he'd done this to himself. He left at 4:17 p.m. Within days, I was promoted to senior project director. The role that should have been his if he hadn't tried to take everything that was mine. My salary increased by 40%. My corner office overlooked the city. My name appeared in the company newsletter as the leader who'd brought integrity back to the organization. But the strangest part, the vindication felt smaller than I'd imagined it would. 6 months later, I stood in that corner office, watching city lights flicker on below me. I delivered 3 major projects on time and under budget. My client acquisition strategy had generated more revenue than any project in company history. I was untouchable now. Not because of what I'd done to Kyle, but because of what I'd built despite him. I opened my journal from the night I first discovered his betrayal and read my words back to me. So much anger there, so much hurt. And beneath it, a determination that had grown into something powerful. The truth was I'd won. Not by destroying Kyle, though that happened, but by refusing to let him define me. By building my own success with such clarity and integrity that when everything came out, the contrast was undeniable. My phone buzzed. Aaron texted. Got that promotion. Never would have happened without you. Thank you. Priya emailed. Just got assigned to lead the Shepherd account. Feels good. Travis sent. You changed everything. Smiled. The people Kyle had hurt were healing. The system that allowed his behavior was changing. And me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. I'd learned that revenge isn't about inflicting pain. It's about becoming so undeniably successful, so completely whole, that what they did to you becomes irrelevant to your story. Kyle had said a story about my failure. I'd rewritten it as a story about my rise. I thought about what Victoria, my lawyer, had told me during our final meeting. You didn't just win, she'd said. You proved something far more important. You proved that the truth, when presented clearly and methodically, is more powerful than any lie. Kyle tried to erase you. Instead, he made you unforgettable. The company restructured its entire attribution and approval process based on what happened. New policies were implemented company-wide. Documentation became more transparent. Younger employees learned from what Kyle had done, what not to do, what to watch for in others, how to document their own work properly. I'd inadvertently created change. Real lasting change. My mother called me that evening, something she rarely did. I'm proud of you, she said simply. Not just for being successful, but for doing the right thing, even when it cost you. Those words meant more than any promotion ever could. And now that was the only story anyone would remember.